Inside UK and US prisons, the scariest things inmates experience every day. Before we go any further, if you think you can handle the truth, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment now. Because once you step inside these walls, there's no pause button and no way out. The alarm was already screaming when officers reached cell block D. Red lights washed over concrete walls as inmates were forced face down on the tier, hands spread, eyes fixed on the floor. In a maximum security prison in the American Midwest, a body had been found during morning count, slumped against cold steel bars, unresponsive. No obvious wounds. No witnesses willing to talk. Just silence, thick and deliberate. At first glance, it looked like another statistic in a system drowning in them. But within hours, officials realized this death wasn't random. The inmate had been transferred only 3 weeks earlier from a UK prison after serving time abroad, a rare cross-border case tied to organized crime. His file was thin. Too thin. And someone had clearly wanted it that way. Across the Atlantic, in a crowded prison outside London, officers were dealing with their own crisis. A coordinated lockdown had been triggered after intelligence reports warned of retaliatory violence. Staff shortages meant entire wings were sealed for days at a time, leaving inmates locked in cells the size of bathrooms, tension rising by the hour. Whispers spread through vents and under doors. Names, numbers, deaths. Fear didn't explode. It simmered. Investigators began connecting dots most people never see. Both facilities had reported a surge in homemade weapons. Both had flagged racial separation intensifying on the tiers. And both had inmates who claimed they were placed in danger after cooperating with authorities, then quietly ignored. Former prisoners described the same pattern: sudden cell reassignments, meals skipped during lockdowns, officers stretched too thin to notice the small warning signs. In this world, survival depended on reading the room, who controlled the phones, who controlled the food, who decided who lived peacefully, and who didn't. The dead man's last phone call became critical. Recorded and archived. It was made just hours before lights out. He spoke calmly, almost resigned, telling a family member he didn't expect to see daylight much longer. No threats. No names. Just one sentence investigators couldn't ignore. They know why I'm here. When detectives finally traced his prison movements, they found something that stopped the investigation cold. A sealed transfer request, filed, approved, and buried, linking him to an incident no one wanted reopened. And when they unlocked the classified file attached to his name, they realized this wasn't just about prison violence anymore. It was about something far bigger and far closer than anyone expected. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The sealed file traced back 5 years to a riot that never officially happened. In a high-security prison in northern England, records showed a routine disturbance quickly contained. No fatalities. No charges. But hidden beneath redactions was evidence of something far darker. 3 inmates severely injured, 1 disappearing entirely, and a confidential informant whose identity was scrubbed from the system. That informant was the same man now dead in an American cell block. Detectives on both sides of the Atlantic reopened the case quietly. Too quietly. The moment requests went out for archived CCTV footage and staff rosters, things started to vanish. Video files were corrupted. Paper logs were missing pages. In the UK prison, a veteran officer who had worked the wing that night suddenly went on indefinite leave. In the US facility, a corrections sergeant reassigned the week before the death stopped answering calls. Inside the prisons, tension sharpened. Inmates sensed something shifting. In the American facility, entire units were locked down after a homemade blade was found taped beneath a cafeteria table, an unmistakable message. In the UK prison, officers reported inmates refusing meals, trading food instead for favors and protection. Food had always been currency, but now it was leverage. A second death followed. This time it wasn't an inmate. A junior corrections officer was found unconscious in a stairwell between units during a night shift in the US prison. Officially, it was ruled a fall. But investigators noticed defensive wounds on his arms and a radio smashed beyond use. He had been the last officer to escort the dead inmate back to his cell the night before he died. Fear crept into the investigation itself. Detectives realized whoever had orchestrated the original cover-up still had influence, inside the prisons and beyond them. Witnesses began recanting statements. One former inmate who agreed to talk in exchange for protection abruptly withdrew, saying only, "You can't protect me from people who don't exist on paper." The breakthrough came from an unexpected place: prison meal logs. During lockdown periods in both the UK and US facilities, certain inmates consistently received extra portions, an anomaly in systems known for cutting costs. Those same names appeared on lists of inmates who avoided searches, transfers, and disciplinary action. Protection wasn't random. It was purchased. The dead informant hadn't just been hiding. He'd been moved, fed, and shielded until someone decided the risk was too high. His transfer to the US wasn't for safety. It was to isolate him, bury him, and let the prison do the rest. As investigators prepared to make arrests, a final warning arrived. A message slipped under an office door, typed and signed. "Stop digging. The prisons will finish what we started." And suddenly, the case stopped being about what happened behind bars and became about who was controlling them. By the time investigators realized how deep the control ran, the prisons were already pushing back. In the US facility, a full lockdown was declared after simultaneous fights broke out on 3 separate tiers, too coordinated to be spontaneous. Officers were forced to retreat as alarms blared, leaving inmates sealed inside their cells for nearly 20 hours. During that window, evidence disappeared. A key witness, an inmate scheduled for transfer and protection, was found alive but unresponsive, suffering from severe dehydration and blunt force trauma. He survived, but he never spoke again. Across the Atlantic, the UK prison descended into quiet chaos. Cells stayed locked long past regulation hours due to staff shortages, and tension turned inward. Inmates began enforcing their own rules. Those suspected of talking to authorities were isolated, denied food trades, and threatened through coded knocks on cell walls. The fear wasn't loud anymore. It was organized. Investigators finally identified the structure behind it all: a shadow network operating inside multiple prisons, using inmates as enforcers and corrupt staff as facilitators. Protection was earned through silence. Food privileges, cell placements, and even medical access were quietly manipulated. Those who cooperated with authorities weren't attacked immediately. They were starved out, stressed, and broken down until they made mistakes, or vanished into transfers that led nowhere. The original riot, the one buried years ago, had been sparked by a planned exposure. The informant had provided evidence linking contraband supply routes to external criminal groups, using prison kitchens and maintenance crews as cover. When the riot erupted, it created the perfect distraction. Records were altered. Witnesses were reassigned. One inmate, the same one now dead, was erased from the official narrative. But what no one accounted for was guilt. The unconscious officer from the US prison had regained partial memory before being placed on medical leave. He remembered escorting the informant that final night and noticing something wrong. The cell door had already been unlocked when they arrived. That wasn't protocol. That meant someone else had been there first. Before he could formally testify, his hospital room was broken into. Nothing was stolen. No threats were made. Just a single meal tray left on the bedside table, cold, untouched, stamped with the prison's logo. The message was clear. As pressure mounted, investigators prepared coordinated raids targeting staff members linked to the altered records. But hours before warrants were served, one final incident rocked both systems. In the UK prison, a fire broke out in a storage wing containing archived files. In the US facility, the prison's digital database went offline during a routine update, wiping months of internal communications. Someone was cleaning house. And buried deep in a recovered backup file was one final name: an administrator who had approved every critical transfer, every lockdown exception, every quiet favor. A name no one expected to see, because he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near a prison anymore. The name belonged to a former corrections administrator who had publicly resigned years earlier after a misconduct investigation, one that was quietly dismissed and forgotten. Officially, he had left the system. Unofficially, he had never stopped controlling it. From a private consultancy, he advised on security efficiency, a role that granted access without accountability. He didn't move drugs or weapons himself. He moved people. And in prisons, that was power. The final pieces fell into place quickly, almost too quickly. Financial records revealed payments disguised as consulting fees, routed through shell companies tied to food suppliers and maintenance contracts. Prison meals, understaffed wings, delayed medical care. None of it was accidental. Scarcity created dependence, and dependence created silence. The dead informant hadn't been targeted for what he'd done recently. He was killed because he remembered too much from the riot that was never supposed to exist. When coordinated arrests finally happened, they weren't loud. There were no dramatic standoffs. Officers arrived at dawn, quietly escorting suspects out of offices they had worked in for decades. Inside the prisons, inmates felt the shift immediately. Extra food portions stopped appearing. Lockdown patterns changed. Transfers were frozen. The invisible hands loosened their grip. But justice didn't arrive cleanly. The administrator was found dead in his home before trial. Authorities ruled it a medical event. No signs of forced entry. No note. Just a life ended before testimony could begin. With him gone, the case officially closed. No conspiracy, no organized manipulation, just isolated failures. Former inmates told a different story. They spoke of nights when cell doors opened without alarms, of officers who looked away at the exact wrong moment, of hunger used as a weapon more effective than violence. They described a system where survival depended not on innocence or guilt, but on usefulness. The informant's family received a quiet settlement. No apology. No explanation. His name never appeared in public records as anything more than another inmate who died in custody. And that is the scariest truth about prisons in the UK and the US. Not the fights. Not the weapons. Not even the deaths. It's how easily fear becomes routine, how silence becomes policy, and how entire lives can be erased without anyone outside the walls ever knowing why. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, hit subscribe so you don't miss it.